Okay, so hey guys, welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Edwards versus Covington fight. If you're new around here though and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like it if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Edwards is 21-3 with 7 KOs and 3 submissions, and Covington is 17-3 with 3 KOs and 5 submissions. This fight is for the UFC welterweight title. Edwards' last fight was a win via majority decision versus Usman, and Covington's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Masvidal, that being back in March of 2022. Edwards is a southpaw. Covington's UFC losses have come versus Usman in 2021 and 2019, and Alves in 2015. Edwards' UFC losses have come versus Usman in 2015 and Silva in 2014. So to speak a bit more about what I've just said there, of course this being for the UFC welterweight title, it's now Edwards defending it against a new opponent, somebody barred than Usman, and it's the top contender in the division and the guy who has always been able to beat kind of all comers around him, but just never quite been able to beat the champion, that being Usman at the time. Now he's getting this other chance against Edwards, but like I said, he's been out for a while, and there's been a lot of stuff going on outside in his outside world with, I'm not going to go into it too much, but there's been a lot of stuff going on outside, so is that going to affect him coming into this fight? But as always, he seems as confident as ever and as talkative as ever is what I will say. Edwards, of course, his last fight was that of a shutout victory in my opinion against Usman. I think it was a victory which was clear in my opinion. It was one which did silence a lot of people, because obviously he won the title and he won it in amazing fashion, but people were just thinking that it was a lucky shot and it wasn't really anything that big of a deal and he was going to lose in the rematch. But the fact that he went and kind of gave a masterclass in my opinion against Usman that time round, the third time round, it really showed that he can do it and he is mixing at this level and he deserves to be a world champion. And so it was a very impressive performance. It now gives him momentum and confidence going into this fight. Covington's last fight, like I said, it was a little while ago, but it was a very good performance against Masvidal. It was a fight which he got hurt in, but throughout most of it, it was dominant, and it was clear that he was levels above Masvidal, and managed to get a clear victory. Of course, Edwards is a southpaw, but to be honest, they both switch stances quite a bit, so, you know, I wouldn't really read too much into Edwards being a southpaw. Of course, they both had UFC losses, Covington's being the more recent, but against just Usman, and Edwards being a long time ago now. So yeah, not really overly that important in my opinion going into this fight. But I suppose since Covington fights with Usman, has Covington been the same? We'll have to wait and see. And is he actually of a world level? Of course, this fight is going to answer that, or a championship level, my bad. And so also on this card is Pantoja versus Royval for rematch for the UFC flyweight title, in which I think Pantoja will win via a submission in round 4. I like Pantoja. I think he's, in my opinion, a very good champion, and I think he probably will end up fighting Moreno after this if he wins, and I think he will win. Royval, I mean, he lost the first time against Pantoja and he's been on a good run, but I think Pantoja is a very, very good ground game. He's a very good jiu-jitsu fighter, and yeah, I think he's a very well-rounded fighter, and I think he's going to be able to get a submission. And Royval has shown that he can get submitted, he can get stopped, and he has been in the past, and I think he'll get submitted again. I think he's improved since that last fight, but that, in my opinion, that's just going to add on a couple extra rounds before he does end up getting submitted. Going back to the main event, so Edwards as a fighter, he's fast, he's got great timing, he's a well-rounded striker, he moves very well, he's comfortable on the back foot, he's got heavy kicks, he's composed, he finds gaps, mid-range fighter, he's willing to dig deep, he's got good shot variation, he switches stances well, he's got a good game plan, good takedown defense, he's got that underdog mentality, which I don't know if he's going to have going into this fight, but he has had in the past, and in my opinion that has fueled him in the past. And he's got very good reflexes as well, and I think a lot of the thing to make him such a good well-rounded striker is the timing and the reflexes and the speed. Against Usman in that second fight, he was just too fast for him and was just moving too well for him, and was just out striking him because of the speed, and like I said, the timing I mean, it was the reason why he managed to get the stoppage in the second fight with Usman, and the third fight. I mean, some of the shots he was landing, that body shot that he landed was very good, and that was all down to timing, and he has a very good sense of timing. And I think against a lot of fighters, and with his power being shown now, I think a lot of fighters are gonna possibly be maybe a little bit wary going into strike against him because of how good his timing is and how good of a striker he is and how well he does move, and the fact he's also comfortable on the back foot. Obviously he can get hit with shots and he will be pushed back, but it's nice to see a striker who is willing to move around and then willing to pick his shots on the back foot. And like I said, he showed also a great takedown defense in that last fight versus Usman. People weren't really too sure about his ground game in general, and he proved he had very good takedown defense, and that was something which, like I said, him being possibly the physically weaker guy out of the two between him and Usman, he showed that he could physically withstand Usman's takedown pressure and his want to get him to the ground. The negatives about him, I mean, he's been hurt versus Diaz especially. I think he possibly could have been stopped against Diaz. You never know. If Diaz had pushed it a bit more, that could have ended the fight, and it just possibly was just lucky that he got to that point in the fight. But you see that happen a lot, so I possibly won't read too much into it. I think he can struggle a little bit on the inside. His reflexes are good, but I think he can struggle when it is on the inside. I still don't think he's overly physically strong. I think he can be bullied a little bit, but you know, he's proven and he's improving on that. He can be smothered on the ground when he does get put on the ground, and I think Covington is probably going to aim to get him on the ground quite a lot and smother him, as he did versus Masvidal. He can stand a bit upright at times. It means he's more of a target to get taken down. His head movement, he's not really got loads of that. He can leave his chin quite open at times. He also can tire a bit as well going into the later rounds. Covington as a fighter though, he's a wrestler in my opinion. He's a bit more of a wrestler. He's a jiu-jitsu type fighter. He's aggressive. He's got great grappling transitions. He can move positions while grappling very well and can control the grappling very well. He gives his all in fights. Technical grappler, and people say that he's not really that overly technical of a striker. In my opinion, he's not, but his grappling is very well technical. He's very technically well, and he's got a high IQ in the way of grappling, and I think he doesn't really get the credit that he deserves for that at times. He's tough, he wears you down, outworks you, establishes dominance on ground, and has a great ground and pound, and utilises his position when he is on ground, and really is dominant when he is in a dominant position on the ground, and really makes the most of any dominant position he has on the ground. And that's nice to see. Certain fighters don't always utilise the positions that they have and are willing to too easily give it up, but he didn't do that, and he showed that in that last fight versus Masvidal. He also switches stance as well. He is well and does well in defensive positions, especially that on the ground as well. To be fair, he can do well in defensive positions. Even, I mean, he's not amazingly good on the back foot, but striking wise, but he can do well in defensive positions and can switch them to attacking positions whilst on the ground. He's composed. He's pressure fighter as well, and he's relentless, and I mean, he did very much outwork Masvidal in their fight. Negatives about him: he's been hurt badly. He's been hurt versus Usman, he's been hurt versus Masvidal, and they're the two most recent fights for him, and so he's been hurt, and he's been hurt badly, and so if he can do that, and Edwards is on a bit of a run of hurting fighters, he could definitely hurt Edwards could definitely hurt Covington. He's been through a lot in fights as well, not just outside the ring. He's been through a lot inside as of recent, inside the ring he's been through a lot with fighters and been through a lot of wars and stuff like that, and so him being older as well, is that going to play a factor? Like I said, he's been out for a while. Is that going to play a factor? There's a few questions. Striking wise, he can be a bit wild, he can overcommit, he can leave himself open, he's not as fast, he can sometimes come in off balance, he's got not really very good boxing technique, and setting up, he can sometimes struggle to set up submission attempts. I think sometimes he can just go for a submission attempt because he comes in a bit too wild and fails his attacking, striking things, and then it's just, I just don't feel like he sets it up as well as he possibly could do. And yeah, I just think his striking isn't really at the same level of that of Edwards, but I think his wrestling is much better. He's doesn't really feint much in general, and so like I say, he can become a little bit predictable at times. He can struggle himself on the back foot, and he can also struggle getting finishes. I feel like sometimes he can struggle turning up the pace and just doing the end thing to be able to get the finish. I think he possibly could have got the finish versus Masvidal. He's very dominant in that fight, but he just didn't turn it up enough to get the finish. And when he talks as much as he talks, I don't know, I feel like he should be getting more finishes in my opinion. And I think it will also be interested if Edwards possibly might be coming into this fight a bit emotional now because of what Covington's been saying, and especially as of recent in them press conferences, what he's been saying. And he's very good at that. He's very good at getting under your skin, and Edwards possibly isn't really too used to that yet, and so he might come in a little bit emotional and might come in a little bit wild himself, and I don't feel like that's something that he should be doing. But hopefully for his sake that isn't the case. Edwards is the favourite, and I think that Edwards will win via TKO in round 3. I think he'll be able to get the stoppage. I think he'll time him, like I say, coming in with them wild striking and that predictability. It wouldn't surprise me if it's another kick, to be honest, but he does have other things in his arsenal that could be used to stop Covington, and I think then Covington, I just think that with his age and everything now, I feel like he's going to be easier to get stopped, and he is very tough and he is very durable and he can take a shot, but like I say, he's been through a lot in fights, and there's only a certain amount of time that I feel like you can take it, and when you've got the timing of Edwards and the speed, I feel like he will be able to do it. But you never know, if Covington does get him on the ground, then it could be a completely different game. But in my opinion, I think Edwards will win via TKO in round 3. Then who we could go on to fight? I mean, Muhammad has been calling for a fight and for a long time been highly ranked in the welterweight division. Rakhimov versus Thompson is also on this card. In my opinion, I feel like Rakhimov is probably going to win that fight. So Rakhimov could make for a great fight versus Edwards. He is on a very good roll at the moment himself. But then Edwards has also said that he's willing to go up in weight and fight the winner of Strickland versus Duplessis. So I suppose you never know, that could be a fight that could be made further along down the line, possibly next. You never know in the UFC with the amount of fighters that are willing to fight in 2 weight categories nowadays. Like I say, you never know. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.